post turtle. You know what a post turtle is?
No.
You drive down the road and there's a turtle on its back on top of the post. You know how he got up there. You know he doesn't belong there. And you know he didn't do it by himself. And he probably doesn't have anything to do.
I heard that.
I grew up in Texas and I've never seen a turtle. Sorry.
Google post turtle.
I've seen some post
I believe
armadillos.
it.
I've seen some armadillos upside down in Texas.
The wrong part of Texas.
Right.
Or the right part of Texas.
Poor turtle.
Poor turtle.
Poor thing.
When you're driving down a road, country road, and come across a fence post with a turtle bounced on top, that's a post turtle. The old man saw a puzzled look on the doctor's face, so he continued to explain, you know he didn't get there by himself. He doesn't belong there.
We are live.
It's a joke on politicians, actually. So,
Oh, goodness.
all right, are we ready?
Yes, we are.
Okay, we're going to call the Oregon City Commission work session to order for Tuesday, May 12th, 2020. Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Rachel Lau Smith,
Here.
Commissioner Denise McGriff,
Present.
Commissioner Rocky Smith. And he's muted there, but I see that he's here. And then Commissioner Frank O'Donnell,
Here.
Mayor Dan Holliday.
Here. Okay, so I think we're going to skip future agenda items tonight, and we're just going to move on to, unless somebody has something specific they want to bring up. Hearing none, we'll move on to discussion items. 20-250 State of Oregon Reopening Plan, City Facilities Reopening Update. Mr. Conkle.
Thank you, Mayor. Evening, Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about how we're preparing as a city for our city facilities and our staff. So at the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, we took the steps to close down public facilities, set up employees to work from home and shelter in place, scaled back to the absolute minimum, staffing in large work groups like operation and parks maintenance. The goal of this response was to minimize potential COVID-19 exposure, encouraging citizen employees to remain home, help flatten the curve, and ensure that critical staff stayed healthy and available to respond to emergencies. So, there's a couple things that are happening right here. Last Thursday, we received an update from the governor outlining what are the gating requirements or the pre-requirements that have to be met, the pre-qualifications. And that's a combination of information from the counties as well as the Health Region 1, of which Clackamas County is located in. Health Region 1 includes Clackamas County, Multnomah County, Washington County, Clatsop County, Tillamook, and Columbia counties. And so really looking at the health system at that regional level, because we're not like, let's say, Bend, where you pretty much have one, health provider, set of hospitals there, and you know what your population is. Here you can have folks coming from any part of the country, of the counties, going to certain hospitals in the region. So we have to look at it on a regional level. So these are requirements that the county submits the plan to the state. The state then reviews that plan. Once approved, you move into phase 1 of the reopening plan as identified by the governor. In identifying those, I did include as exhibits the executive order 20-12 that we're currently still under, and those limitations that are in place. The second attachment that I provided was the prerequisites with more detail. So when they say prerequisite 1, declining prevalence of COVID-19, there are standards for what that means and what needs to be met in order to move that criteria from required to being met. Minimum testing regime, contact tracing system. And those spell out the minimum number of, for example, testing per 10,000 of people, how many contact tracers per 100,000 of population. So there are some standards in there that the counties need to address and meet. Isolation quarantine facilities, finalize statewide sector guidelines, sufficient healthcare capacity, and sufficient personal protective equipment, PPE supply. So those are the prerequisites that the county plan and the regional health group needs to meet. Included, I also attached some of the direction that we're starting to see. So what's beneficial is that as we're putting together how we're going to protect our employees and begin to engage with the public again in our facilities, we're also looking at what the guidelines coming out for outdoor recreation are, for example, from the state, to make sure that we're consistent with what those guidelines say. The hard part is, we're not really retail, we're not really office, so we're trying to navigate what makes the most sense. And because of the diverse range of services that we provide, that's going to look different in different facilities.
Vice Chair of the 3rd Congressional District.
Sorry about that.
So that's going to look different in different facilities as we work through it. And so then what I included in the staff report were really kind of the minimum standards, what we're going to try to obtain as we're starting to bring employees back and start to reopen up to the public as we move through that gating requirement. Things such as, obviously some of the basics, hygiene. How are we going to, stressing proper hygiene, not touching your face, the 6 foot physical distancing. But then we also get into, you're going to start to see some improvements made at facilities. Plexiglass at some of the counters where we take, where we're dealing with the public, where we're taking implants, how to do that. So you're going to start seeing some of those physical improvements being made. We're continually monitoring and trying to buy up, some of the PPE equipment that we're going to need moving through this. This one's a little hard because, we're not exactly sure what the final standard is going to be. But, whether it's providing masks, whether it's providing hand sanitizer, when it's providing, make sure that we have enough cleaning supplies. Because you can imagine the public that we get here at City Hall during the day, different volume than what the library is going to experience and over there, and the clientele and the number of people coming through there. So the one benefit that we do have is that you have the state library board working on consistent standards, recommendations for how to start to provide services again. And that's important for one, trying to be as consistent as we can in providing these services back to the public, as well as protecting our employees and the public who utilize those resources. Number two is really trying to coordinate, because as you can imagine, we have reciprocal agreements to work with other counties, other cities, how we process book loans and whatnot. And if we open up a loan, we will get inundated. There will be, because of reciprocal agreements with Multnomah County, Washington County, we would be inundated and not be able to handle that. And so it's really trying to coordinate with the other jurisdictions to make sure we're all comfortable with a set standard moving together and trying to be as coordinated as we can in the services we provide and how we open up to the public. Same thing goes with parks. Really trying to follow the guidelines that are being put out by the State Parks Advisory Committee so that we have some consistency in how we're doing that for many of the same reasons. Some of the guidelines are, if you can't clean restrooms twice a day, that's the recommendation. We will struggle with that, with our staffing levels, to clean all of our restrooms twice a day. I'm not sure that we can do that. So, what do we do in that situation? So really trying to work through some of those. So, I think that what I'm, trying to convey here is that, we've got a good idea of what minimum basic standards should be. but we also realize that there are bigger conversations that have to happen because of how each facility operates differently, how many people they're going to be able to accommodate, still meeting the requirements that are going to come out in phase 1, phase 2, which have caps on the number of people allowed safely into a facility, as well as coordinating some of these services that we offer to the public that will impact people more than just inside of Oregon City. So how do we coordinate library openings with the larger region and do that as coordinated as we can in the services we provide, when we provide them, and how we provide them. So some of these are still going to be works in progress to get to specific facility plans. But really it's trying to tie that back to the executive order that's in place right now, plus the Reopening Oregon plan that's been put out there as you move from stage 1 through the gating requirement into stage 1 eventually into stage 2 eventually into stage 3. So I'm not sure how much detail you want to go into, or if there are specific questions we can try to answer.
Let me just update while we're on this subject. Still having continuing discussions with other mayors around the county and the region. And I spoke with Gary Schmidt, the county's administrator, on Monday afternoon. He assured us that the county is going to be ready to submit the county's application after the BCC meets on Tuesday. So they'll have their plan together a week from today, and he assures me that they'll be ready, assuming the BCC approves the plan. They'll submit it the same day to the governor.
Who's
So-
BCC?
The Board of County
County
Commissioners.
Commissioners.
Sorry, broke my own rule there. So we have that to look forward to. So that's all I have. Go ahead.
Howard, yeah. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about in particular is the boat ramp. And I understand that our parks are open, but that we've closed off certain facilities within parks, like playgrounds and structures and stuff like that, following the governor's guidance. And I think we have chosen to close parking lots. And then on Friday, West Lynn opened their boat ramp. Prior to Mother's Day weekend, it was sunny, it was warm, and I thought it was interesting that they decided to open their boat ramp. I know I have called Mr. Conkle a couple times asking when the city was going to open our boat ramp, because it is one recreation opportunity that families could take advantage of, go out in their boat, maintain 6-foot distance from people outside of their household without any problems.
Not to mention it's steelhead and salmon season, but
And so at this point, people need, we need little baby steps, and I considered this a baby step. And so I thought it was interesting that West Lynn opened their boat ramp. So I called Mayor Axelrod, and I talked to him this afternoon to ask him about that, about West Lynn's opening, and why and how they got to that decision. And the first thing he did was reference the May 5th governor's news release when she opened state parks. And in that, there's a bulleted list at the bottom that discusses the restroom issue. And I think the restroom issue is one of the main issues around these facilities staying closed. In that order from the governor, which provided guidance on state parks opening, it did mention cleaning restrooms ideally 2 times per day, but if not, you could keep them closed, and you should be posting information like we're posting information about everything else that included, amenities may not be available to you as you expect them to be. Bring soap, bring your own sanitizer in case you need it because the restroom facility may not be open. In West Lynn's case, they are using porta potties, and the porta potty company is taking on the responsibility of cleaning it at least twice per day to meet that requirement and keeping up with those facilities. I also talked to Mayor Stimple of Gladstone this afternoon. Their city commission is going to talk about this same exact conversation tonight. I don't know what their decision is going to be. One of my concerns is that if we do it piecemeal, then people are going to travel to another city in order to take advantage of somebody else's amenities. And I think the desire from Mayor Axelrod and from Mayor Stimple is that all of us in this nearby area will coordinate and ideally open our boat ramps so that Oregon City folks, if John Storm is backed up, that they won't just drive over to Gladstone if Gladstone opens their boat ramp and the same thing for West Lynn. So I would love it if our parks could open the boat ramp and come up with a way. If West Lynn could do it successfully on a 90-degree hot summer weekend and didn't have any problems with it, I would love for us to do that for our residents. And it would also, I think, help our community as a whole between Gladstone and West Lynn and ourselves and keeping people as close to home as possible, but it's still providing recreational opportunities. So I'll stop there
Okay.
and let other people.
Does anybody have any disagreement with Commissioner Lyle Smith? Commissioner McGriff?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Holliday. My only concern about it is that you're talking about the boat ramp at, because
Clackamas Park.
there is one of the boat ramps is open, the Sportcraft Landing.
Both sport craft
Sportcrafts are open. So it's not
Mm-hmm.
like everything is closed because they've been down there. The parking lots are full. People are fishing. So you're just talking about the one remaining.
Yes.
That's not open.
Yes.
So you're saying if people can't access Sportcraft, they should have another opportunity because
Well, Meldrum Burr is still closed too, so.
Right, yeah, Meldrum,
Meldrum
yeah.
Burr and Clackamas Park constitute the majority of
Right.
fishing access on the upper river.
Yeah, but I just wanted to make sure that people understand that the whole thing is not closed. There are two that are open,
Right.
so. Okay.
Which we kept open the whole
Right,
time as West Lynn and Gladstone shut down.
Right.
And we absorbed their
Folks,
boats.
yes. I know,
Yes.
I've been seeing lots of people down there.
Commissioner Smith, you have anything for us?
I guess I would lean on, what staff and our city manager, input is on that. But I think if we coordinated with Gladstone, that would be great. But if we've already got one open, I don't think it's, drastic to open immediately.
So, part of the reasoning in closing the gates at Clackamas Park was to keep kids out of the skate park, right?
Well, it's multiple things. So we have two gates, one to the RV park and then one into the parking lot right behind the RV dump station.
Right.
So they're pretty close to Clackamas Drive. So yeah, the skate park's technically closed, but so the playgrounds equipment that was there, the RV park's been closed down. The shelters down in there have been closed down. Mm-hmm. And our problem was those were the only controlled accesses were within 50 feet or 100 feet roughly of Clackamas Drive right there. And so if we open the gates to get to the boat ramp, we open up the gates to the entire park and all the parking lot. And so, what we were trying to do was limit, because to be honest with you, one of the biggest complaints that we have is park use. Through this whole event has been park use and people being in parks, whether it be, in Old Kenema Park with multiple cars sitting there all day doing whatever is going on. We've seen it at Clackamas Park when we were doing some drive-throughs early on before this started and we closed it down. It is a regional park. It's a regional draw. It's a beautiful park, beautiful location. And in an effort to try to limit distance travel coming to Oregon City was to shut down so that you can still walk in there.
I think we're past that point now with this. When beaches are going to open this weekend, You know, and they're gonna have their own problems with people from Portland coming down there. You know, Hood River's dealing with the same thing, but I think on the whole, our problem at Clackamas Park is pretty low down on the risk level, especially when, you know, we know for 50, 100 years that viruses themselves don't do well in sunlight and fresh air. So it's really about, you know, giving people something to do and the opportunity to use the facilities they've paid for. So if we can, you know, fence off or somehow make sure that the skate park isn't being used, I don't see any issue with folks, you know, family units walking around the park or getting on a boat and going in the river or, you know, whatever the case may be. We have to start letting people make their own decisions about how much risk they're willing to take.
Well, and it doesn't change our notices about social distancing.
Right.
About hygiene, you know, it doesn't change any of that.
Right.
All of that is still in place.
I got one more. Commissioner O'Donnell?
I don't have anything further to add other than what's already been said by my fellow commissioners.
So,
And I think, you know, so it's all interpretation, right? And how do we apply this? And we're trying to walk that line. The recommendation that'll come out, and this is for when we enter phase one. This is not even where we're at right now.
Right.
Keep day use areas that are prone to attracting crowds, including not limited to playgrounds, picnic shelter structures, water parks, pools, sport courts for contact sports like, and overnight use areas closed.
yet in the governor's order, the most recent adaptation, she's allowing day camps
Day use areas.
and day use areas and all other things to open on the 15th of May.
Yeah.
So we continue to get, conflicting information from all over the place. And at some point, we have to make some decisions on our own. And I think this is a pretty simple step. And I'm not seeing any argument from the commission. So I think you have a general consensus about how to move forward with that.
If we move forward with that, I would propose that we try to target it strictly for boat users.
That's fine for now.
So that means we would try to limit the non-boat use parking as much as we could, because
Sure. I mean, you could even put out, if you have cones, restrict the parking, every other parking spot has been discussed as an option. I think that's fine. I'm really trying to target the boat ramp and for Gladstone, Westland, and Oregon
Right.
City to all have our boat ramps open so that,
And the
folks.
thing about Clackamas Park is we have the overflow parking across the street specifically for boats and trailers. So, we have the space and, I just continue to say it's something that people can do socially distanced that's safe.
Right.
Are we getting calls? Because
I've gotten a few calls. I just haven't.
I know when it hit, there was a run early. I think the run picked up.
Right.
And I noticed some trailer parking kind of extending down towards River Shore Hotel. I think when I went down last Thursday, I'm guessing it was maybe 3/4
Right.
full.
But again, it's because a lot of people were still freaked out. And I think people are coming out of the freak out moment and going, I bought a fishing license. I got a $30,000 boat. I want to use it for something. And, the weather's not great for the next week or so, but it's going to get better fairly quickly.
Yeah, I guess I should say, for me, it's an incremental step. If we can take an incremental step, it shows that the city is looking to reopen and is caring about the recreation.
Why don't we
and-
target it for the 15th?
May I ask a question, Mayor Holliday?
Sure.
So Commissioner Lyle Smith mentioned that Westland is open. I don't think they have as many boat ramps in their community as we do. And what is Gladstone? Do we have any information about what Gladstone is doing?
They're having a discussion tonight, but actually, Westland has one more boat ramp than we have.
Yeah.
Oh, do they?
They have Cedar Oak, they have
Yeah, I know about Cedar Oak.
Marius Young, and they have a boat ramp at Willamette Park.
Okay, yeah, Mary S. Young, I always thought of as a state boat ramp, but,
Yeah.
I will just say that I'm gonna err on the side of cautiousness, not because I myself have a concern but I'm concerned about, our citizens, and I want to make sure that whatever steps we take, we are sending out the right message. I would say my concurrence depends on what Gladstone is going to do. We already know what West Lynn has done, and I would just like to see that coordinated before I would feel more comfortable. Like I said, if Sportcraft was closed, I would have no objection to opening ours, but Sportcraft is open, and that gives us an outlet.
Okay. Thanks. Let's, you have anything else on that subject?
Do we have any comments from our interim parks director?
I'm sure he has an opinion, yes.
I would-
I think
Mr. Robertson, do you have
I
something to say on this
wouldn't like
subject?
hearing it.
You know, we made a choice, assuming you can hear me here, we made a choice to keep Sportcraft open during the entire time. It's a single-use facility. The only thing that it did was allow people to convey their watercraft into the water and then go enjoy their day, do their fishing, whatever. The choices that we made on Clackamas Park is because it's a multi-use facility. It's not just skateboarders, it's not just boaters, it's not just picnickers, it's not just horseshoe players, it's not just people walking and enjoying, the outdoors. It's a combination of all those things that make it a little bit more difficult, a little bit more challenging to manage the overall facility. Can we open that facility? Sure, we can give it a try. My personal opinion is that I think it's going to be a difficult one for us to manage for boaters only, but if that's the wish of the commission, then that's the wish of the commission.
All right, thanks, sir. With that, I think we can move on unless somebody has something else. Seeing none, Willamette Falls Legacy Project update, Mr. Conkle.
And actually, I was going to turn this over to Ms. Turway.
Ms. Turway, go ahead.
Thanks very much. The purpose of this update is just to catch the commission up to speed on the Willamette Falls Legacy Project. As you recall, we talked a little bit about who would be implementing programming back in February, but we haven't had an overall project update in quite some time. I am pleased to introduce Brian Moore, who's the project manager for the Willamette Falls Legacy Project.
Mr. Moore,
He's still muted.
unmute yourself, sir.
He is now.
No audio.
How's this? Is this better?
That's better, thank you.
Oh, thank you. Sorry about that. It wouldn't be a Zoom meeting without at least one audio error.
Don't I know
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, honorable commissioners. It's great to be able to present to you this presentation. I'm not sure if you can see it. I cannot see it currently.
So, Katie, you want to share your desktop?
There we go. That looks good. All right. A few of you have been involved very closely with the Willamette Falls Legacy Project since it began, but we're going back to provide, basically get everybody up to speed. So as I'm sure you all know, when the Blue Heron Paper Mill went out of business in 2011, Oregon City, Clackamas County, Metro, and the state got together to form a partnership to guide public investment in the catalytic redevelopment of the abandoned mill site. The partnership formed the Willamette Falls Legacy Project, and it's enshrined in an intergovernmental agreement signed by all four parties. Next slide. This shows the property outlined in red, the Blue Heron Paper Mill site, and With the partnership formed, Metro was able to secure an easement across the property that set the rules for how we would be able to design and build a river walk, which would be the first investment envisioned by the Willamette Falls Legacy Project. Next slide. Oregon City really took the lead with establishing the 4 core values for the project. That includes public access, historical and cultural interpretation, economic redevelopment, and healthy habitat. And these 4 core values really represent the balance that we've always been trying to strike with investment in this project. And really it represents the 4 key public interests for the project. Next slide. So in addition to having those 4 core values, public engagement really shaped the first pass at how we would achieve those values. It was decided that community engagement would be a critical part of the process overall. Thousands of Oregonians, both in person and online, contributed their thoughts and wishes for what would happen on the property. In addition to that direct input, the project team also hosted numerous community conversations and hundreds of tours on the site. Next slide. So with those core values and that prioritizing of public engagement, Oregon City took the first major step of changing the zoning on the site. And so what you see in front of you is the framework plan that provides the resulting zoning that changed it from industrial to downtown mixed use. And with that framework and easement and the intergovernmental agreement in place, on the next slide, the partnership continued with public engagement to develop the vision for the Riverwalk. And the vision that you see here was established with all of that input from all of the citizens of this region, of Oregon City, also with the approval of the partners and approval of the property owner. So on the next slide, you'll see this shows a wireframe of what we were hoping to be the first phase of the project. And it was really a challenge to try and tackle what the first phase of the project would be. And ultimately, we settled on making improvements to this Mill H complex, as we call it. It's on the southwest corner of the property. And the reason we focused on it is because it would provide a prominent view of the falls, access to the falls, which was required by state funding, and a really great opportunity to provide a high quality proof of concept for the project. So the idea is we wanted something that when we finished it, people could look at it and see the high level quality that we're really aiming for, as well as providing opportunities for really world-class cultural and historic interpretation, opportunities to both change the site significantly in visual ways, as well as being able to retain key infrastructure improvements or industrial improvements that have been made on the property, so that people could experience the site both for what it used to be and what it could be in the future.
So Brian, the elevator is contained inside that brown structure?
Yes, theoretically.
All right, thank you.
So on slide 9, the next slide, one of the challenges for that approach is that getting there would require interim or temporary access. And so our proposal was to provide a parking lot in what's currently a graveled area, and then use most of the existing Main Street infrastructure to go down to the PGE Dam and then walk along the PGE Dam to access the Mill H complex. And you can see that in the bottom right-hand corner of this slide. Through the process of doing all of this, we had cost estimates done, And the cost estimates came back overall at more than what we had originally allocated for the project, more than what we had available to spend on construction. And in addition to us going through the process of figuring that out, the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde purchased the property. And so when Grand Ronde purchased the property, they took a look at the designs that had been approved by the previous property owner and basically requested that we consider another alternative or another approach to getting to the phase one area. And so what you see in front of you now is the proposal that they put forward for the new phase one approach. And so this would stay largely along the river's edge. It would provide a parking lot closer to the water's edge. It would bridge sections of the site, and it would address seismic and structural issues in the pipe chase and yard area, and provide an additional elevator, so there would be two. This elevator would be temporary, as they've imagined, and it would allow people to get from the yard area up into the Mill H building complex. So I had mentioned that there were some financial challenges. So the original budget for the project was set in 2015, and by the time we got our cost estimates for the construction effort, we found out that we would need about $30 million in order to fully build out the Mill H vision. And obviously, with a $12.5 million construction budget, that left us with a gap. And so the first thing that we did is we took a look at options for scaling back the proposed phase one and reducing the extent to which we'd be redeveloping the Mill H building complex. And we found that we could reduce this overall scale of it down to about $20 million. This is a challenging spot of the site. It's right at the river's edge. It requires in-water work. It's difficult to access because of the PGE Dam and other structures around it. But it's also a good place to start because if you build your way into that site, you'll inevitably have to shut down large portions of the Riverwalk in order to finish building that section out. So when Grand Ronde provided their proposal that you saw previously, they also included a cost estimate, and their construction cost estimate for their approach, which did include improvements to the Mill H building complex, came out to $50 million. And so that leaves us with the financial challenge that I think we were facing, fall of last year when we saw that the original vision for the Mill H complex was going to cost $30 million and exceed our budget. And this slide shows the reduced version of the phase one build out. It's the area that's highlighted in yellow. And so with the sort of scaled back version of phase one, we would be able to build out a smaller portion of the overall vision. Go ahead and go to the next slide.
But can I ask a quick, could you go back to the previous slide?
Yes.
The structure looks the same. So for the Mill H tower, what changed on that between the first plan and the new plan?
The Mill H tower is the same. What we're not doing with the scaled back version is we wouldn't be doing any of the work around the boiler building or the stock cylinder. So we'd be removing those two sections entirely.
So how are we getting there then?
Well, that would require accessing down Main Street. And so unless we ultimately choose to go down Main Street to reach this section, we would have to build out the boiler building and the stock cylinder.
Okay. Go ahead, move on.
Grand Ron's approach includes building out the boiler building and stock cylinder because you'd have to do that in order to get to this viewpoint.
And how much financial participation is Grand Ron willing to have?
Grand Ron has not been willing to provide a number. They said that they would be willing to fund some amount. They have not specified an amount for future phases of the Riverwalk, but they're not prepared to make any financial commitments to the first phase of the Riverwalk. And so there's a number of issues to address. Top of the list and the easy one is to update our agreement with the Willamette Falls Trust. They're the nonprofit that's helping to do fundraising for Oregon City, for the project, both for the Riverwalk as well as for programming. We would then need to identify a feasible phase one. That means something that's within the budget. We need to gain assurance from the state that the funding would still be applicable to that feasible phase one. We need to establish a development agreement, and that is a development agreement that would be between Oregon City and the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde. And the reason for that is because the Riverwalk is included in the zoning and land use, and the Riverwalk falls within the Willamette River Greenway. And so there are certain requirements for helping to fund public infrastructure on the city side. And so I believe that the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde would like to have some clarity and certainty around what their financial obligation is.
Well, I'd like to have the partners have an agreement with Grand Ronde before the Grand Ronde comes to us for a development agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that's a perfect segue to the next bullet point, which is a government-to-government agreement between Metro and the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde.
Well, so that should say not Metro, but the partners.
It's not clear that the partners, the partners are formed from an intergovernmental agreement, and it's not clear which agency would hold a partnership with Grand Ronde through the partnership. And so
now, what I'm saying, Brian, is I understand the technical side, that the actual technical agreement is going to be between Metro and tribes, but I need to have all four partners on the same page before anything like that is done. So that's going to require at least one or two partners group meetings before we can get to that place.
Yes.
Okay.
So yes, and then and the last thing that not the last thing, but one of the other major items that we need to address is to establish what the phase one budget truly is going to be. We've been basing it on the $12.5 million that we've received from the state, and the money that has been contributed by Metro and Oregon City has been largely committed to soft costs, architecture and engineering, those sorts of things. The Willamette Falls Trust has successfully raised about $7 million, but has not yet cut a check to the project. That would certainly help the overall budget situation. And if they raise additional funds, that would further improve the budget situation. And last and certainly not least, Metro did pass the bond, the Nature for All bond at the end of 2019. And that included a commitment of an additional $20 million to the project. I also have been speaking with staff, both from Oregon City and Clackamas County, and encouraging folks to find where there might be additional resources for Oregon City and Clackamas County to also help close the gap. And so, Mr. Mayor, to your point, I think that when the partners have agreement on how the financial gap will be closed and what the relationship with Grand Ronde looks like, we'll be able to enshrine those in our government-to-government agreements and our development agreement. So I think you're absolutely right. We have quite a few partners meetings before we're going to have clarity on next steps.
All right, so I'm going to start with the commissioners in the room. Commissioner McGriff, you have anything for us?
Well, yes, just one brief observation that Brian basically stated that, so we have a request, I'm assuming, to change the focus of the plan that was originally approved. There's obviously financial considerations to make that happen. So it seems to me that we're going to need to have our partners, the Confederated Tribes, step up. If they want that to happen, they're going to need to step up and help make that happen, in my opinion.
I totally agree.
It can't be, well, we'll help you down the road, but we want this change. I mean, I'm not objecting to the change, but I understand, as Brian said, having been one of the people here who's been involved since the beginning, of why Main Street was chosen the way it was chosen. I mean, there's logic to it. There is everything keys on that. So that's my only comment.
There is also logic to the tribe's point, and I
understand
totally
that,
agree
yes. Yeah.
from the practical standpoint of construction to have the public wandering down Main Street
they can't.
and be able to have construction vehicles and other people working on either side. So, that's this long-term discussion we're going to have
exactly.
with tribes. Commissioner Lyle Smith, you have anything?
Yes, I agree with Commissioner McGriff, and we can't lose sight of the fact that this group has already invested a lot of money and time and effort into planning the original alternative.
Right.
And so we can't just ignore that investment of hundreds of thousands of dollars.
And people.
And so we wouldn't be good stewards of taxpayer dollars if we just said, oh yeah, don't worry about that. We'll just move on and do all that over again and move on a new spot.
Yeah,
So I do have one question for Mr. Moore. The bridge and the new alignment, is that planned to be a permanent structure, or is that considered to be a temporary as a phase one?
Our understanding is that would be a permanent structure. It would be a new permanent bridge in addition to what was originally envisioned in the Riverwalk.
But all along, we had envisioned long-term that the pathway would come in somewhere near that alignment, correct?
Near that alignment, but it would stay at grade and be further upland into the site and more integrated with the redevelopment of the site.
Right.
But that design does not necessarily eliminate the possibility of being able to access the other pieces, right?
That's correct. It does not eliminate the possibility. It just reduces it significantly.
Okay. Commissioner Smith?
I have no questions at this time.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Well, Mr. Moore touched on the fact, and the report also stated that the Willamette Falls Trust and the Willamette Falls Legacy Project agreement has expired, and he said it's going to be renewed, which is important. To reaffirm something the mayor said, partnership equals a voice in the decision. And I'm not one to just subscribe that Metro makes decisions on our behalf. As I say, partnership equals voice, and that voice, Metro can be the conduit, but they need to speak with the consent of other partners, including Oregon City. I'm just reaffirming what the mayor said.
I think that's fully understood by the partners. Okay. Mr. Moore, you have anything else for us? Do you have something, Commissioner?
I don't think.
Okay. All right, then thank you, and we'll move on.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Commissioners.
Okay, so we're on to Public Works Water Service and 2012 Master Plan Amendment Update, Mr. Lewis.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. Most of you are pretty familiar with the topic, and we just want to give you an update. It's been a while since we brought this topic. I wanted to
Can I
introduce.
pause you for a second? I
Sure.
just got a text from Mayor Stemple. They're opening up the boat ramp in Mildrenbar Park tomorrow.
Okay.
So,
Thanks for the update.
sure.
Wanted to introduce Patty Nelson. She's a staff person who you may not have met. She's been with the city just a couple of months now, and she was hired as a special projects manager for the city. And she's focused pretty closely on water projects right now, although her background covers a lot of utility work. But she's been really focused on Clackamas River Water, the South Fork Water Board, our water capital program, and that's what she's here to talk about. And she's going to steal the show.
Before I let you start, I have to ask Katie a question. I need to do some research. I was indicated through a couple of citizens that 20 to 25 years ago, the city either had a charge or a program or a vote or something with the area between Holmes Lane and going downhill into Stern Creek Park to provide some kind of sewer service in that area, because that's a dead zone for us. So if you could go back and see if you can find any indication of that, I'd appreciate it. So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and City Commissioners. I'm here tonight, as John had mentioned, to give you an update on our 2002 Water Distribution and Water Master Plan. Our intention is to do an amendment to that. But before we do that, we wanted to touch base on how we serve our Beaver Creek Road concept area. Let's see, I've never used it. Are you on this one? Are we pushing forward? There we go. Just a quick oversight for the presentation. I'm going to provide some background. We're going to focus in on the Beaver Creek Road area and then talk about service options, some of the considerations that we think are important, and then looking for some direction from the commission.
What tower is that?
Oh, John?
Isn't that Hallandale?
Yeah.
No, that's Boynton.
Yeah, Boynton, okay.
Sorry.
I've been on top of that tower.
So I thought this was important as I was researching, water service. Every city has a responsibility from the Oregon administrative rules to plan for their facilities to serve the urban growth area. And consistent with that, City of Oregon cities, all their master plans to date have done that. And really what we're trying to do is provide quality, reliable water service to our customers now and in the future. So what work have we done to date? We have our 2012 Water Distribution Master Plan adopted. That's in place. Back in August, you heard a presentation for the 2019 Capital Improvement Plan, which presented an updated list of projects. And then also related to that, in October, you heard about a rate and system development charge study.
Can you stand by a second?
Huh?
Commissioner O'Donnell's offline. He just texted me.
Lose him?
Yes, we lost him.
Oh, no.
But can he be found?
Yeah.
Well, he's trying to reestablish his connection, so
That's fine.
let's just wait until we get him back online.
I'm gonna stop sharing really quick.
While we're waiting for that, I just wanted to acknowledge Wyatt Parno and his team have really been working with us, talking about financing options. We'll talk about that. And then it looks like John Collins was able to join us from South Fork Water. So hi, John. And if there's any questions regarding their supply, he's here to answer anything. So
Nice bridge, John.
Thank you. It's the least I can do.
The space bar works as a push to talk, by the way.
Perfect. Thank you.
I've been on a bridge like that in Costa Rica.
Pirates of the Caribbean, or is that?
we're still
No, that's a real bridge
Yeah.
somewhere.
Yes.
Yeah, we're waiting.
But
You'll
yeah.
see him pop up there. I haven't seen him. There's only 2 people in the waiting room, and it's you two.
Yeah, I forgot to turn my
So did I.
Zoom off as I walked in.
That's okay.
It's true, you can be two places at once.
There
I
you go.
guess.
You've just proven that theory. You can be in 2 places at once.
You must have lost some sort of internet connection.
That's probably got to be it.
Can we do a?
Oh, there he
cell
is.
phone?
And I could
Ah.
always call him too.
Yes.
Separately if his internet isn't working. It'll just take a second for him to join then.
Okay, there we go. So,
Hold on, his
no,
audio.
I see his audio. I'll wait for his audio to come up.
We're all becoming
I
such
paused
good
the
use-
audio or the presentation while we're waiting for you to come back on, Commissioner O'Donnell. So we're going to proceed. Go ahead, ma'am.
Okay. Let's see, where did I leave off? Where's my presentation?
She's getting it.
There we go. All right. So we'll just hop ahead here. Come on.
Oh, sorry. Yep. Go ahead.
Oh. You're playing games with me, Katie. Still not
Did
working.
it go? Okay, here. Let's, there we go.
All right, so what's next? That's why I'm here. Our next step is a big step, so we need to go through a land use process. The capital improvement plan is part of our water master plan, which is an ancillary document to the comp plan. So it's a public process, quite an extensive process, and we wanted to make sure that the capital improvement plan that we're moving forward with meets with your approval in terms of service to the Beaver Creek area. So we want to check in before that we start that process. And also linked to that is the financial plan. Of course, that affects rates, system development charges, and possibly bonds. So a little bit of background. There was a joint engineering study back in 2018, and what that did is it joined together with Clackamas River Water and Oregon City, looking at kind of the urban growth boundary areas in those transition areas where we're transitioning as our city limits expand, and really looking at service for those areas. Most of the areas there wasn't much of a dispute or just, discussion, but with Beaver Creek, it's a large development area. In the study, there was a proposal for a shared approach. We're calling it a joint engineering solution, which basically provides the infrastructure needed to serve the development, but in a shared fashion. So that's shared cost as well as responsibility. And again, we're looking for some direction there. So for Beaver Creek, we have a concept plan. I think you've seen this before. It's covering our urban growth area. Both of our planning documents, as I've mentioned to you, do provide service, identified service from the city to this area. And I think a key point that I wanted to make is that water is supplied from our South Fork Water Board. And service needs, regardless of who serves out here, we need increased storage. So to serve the development, we need storage, which in the form of reservoirs, pump stations, and transmission mains to get the water to the reservoir. And then timing, I think, I've had a few months to get up to speed, and now I'm feeling really anxious because, the developers are knocking on the door. Given where we're at today, obviously things are a little bit slow, but in indications from our development team, construction continues and development interest still seems to be active. So we have two areas of development that have been active. There's the Villages of Beaver Creek, which has already gone through engineering. They're hoping to start construction, I think, early next year. But the Oregon City Golf Course is a large development that's waiting in the gates. They've come in and talked to us about what the requirements will be, but they haven't started. But we're anticipating that they'll come in this next year for engineering, and then hopefully construction thereafter. So again, the development needs the infrastructure to serve it. So service considerations, water supply, the City of Oregon City and West Linn both are co-owners for South Fork Water. A big portion of that is, our demand drives our justification for water rights. This is a huge area. I think the anticipated development is like 1,100 homes potential. So it's a large, customer base that we'd be looking to bring into not only our customers, but also providing the demand from the South Fork water supply. And then cost, we need a financing plan. So we'll be looking at rates, as I mentioned, systems development charges, and given the size of the developments, may be considering bonding. Now, I talked to Wyatt a bit, obviously with the economic climate, that we're in right now. Before we come back to you, we'll be sitting down as a team and looking at some options and seeing if we can come up with some creative options to minimize, obviously impacts to our customers. And then customer service. So we want to get our water and have our water available to our customers when they need it. So development's coming. We want to make sure that we have the water supply there, and not I think the important thing to remember is our CIP is not just for development. A big portion of that is catching up on a lot of rehab work that needs to be done. And so that's important. That really affects our reliability to our customers. And then timing, I just wanted to emphasize this. I think, the quicker we can move forward, the quicker we can amend the master plan, the quicker we can get the financing plan in place and start getting the revenue and the finances that we need to start building these improvements.
Can I pause you there? Mr. Collins, are you on with us?
I am, yes.
Why don't you talk about water supply just a minute?
First of all, thank you, Mayor Holliday and commissioners. It's a real treat to get to visit with you guys. Don't do this very much, so thanks for having me. Water supplies, sounds like a simple question, but I think you're talking about water supply and the extent of South Fork Water Board has the senior water rights on the Clackamas River, and that in order for us to maintain those water rights and to perfect them as we move forward, we need to justify the ability to serve expansion and growth in our cities. And if we have the responsibility of those justifications, and any kind of a plan that says that we're going to be served by another entity is going to be detrimental to our ability to keep those and maintain those water rights.
So currently, right now, South Fork is able to supply how many million gallons a day?
The treatment plant current capacity is 22 million gallons per day.
But we have
average use.
Good.
And we have an average use of about 8.3 million gallons per day throughout the entire year. The June through first 2 weeks of September, we're up into the 14 to 17. On a really hot day, if we get into 100-degree weather for 2 or 3 days in a row, we'll roll right up to about 18 to 20 million gallons per day.
But the plant has the capacity up to 40 million, right, if we were to add another couple of pumps?
Yes, we'd have to add one pump and a second pipeline to the plant, but the capacity of the plant as it sits right now, the internal capacity of just the treatment plant is 30 MGD.
Okay, and would you just give a quick update on the water rights lawsuit?
Yes, we are trying to get to the Court of Appeals. We have a couple issues with the court being slowed down with the current situation that we're in right now, but we expect to have the last segment with the Court of Appeals. Remember, it's a 17-year court battle now. 8 different components, 7 of them are settled and resolved. There's one last component, and it will be heard from the court. Our attorneys, as we speak, are finishing up their briefs to submit to the court, and we anticipate that will be moving forward in the next 6 to 9 months, and look forward to an answer from the court within the next year and a half, and hopefully we'll be able to put these extensions in our water right litigation from Water Watch of Oregon behind us.
All right, thanks, sir. Right. So, moving on.
All right. Mr. O'Donnell raised his hand.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
I can wait until the conclusion of the presentation. I just want to do some backfill.
All right, thanks, sir.
All right, just real quick, this is our current 2019 capital improvement plan for the Beaver Creek area. There's a number of projects on here. I went ahead and highlighted 3 main projects, which are the distinguishing projects between the 2 options. Here I have the joint, if we were to implement this joint engineering solution, partnering with CRW, this is the projects that would differ. I don't know if I have a pointer. The orange represents the 2019 CIP. So we have an added reservoir. That would be a city-owned reservoir next to Henrici, and transmission mains, and then a new Fairway Dams pump station. If we go with the joint option, what we're doing is we are building 2 new reservoirs with CRW on property that they currently own. And then dealing with the transmission mains to get the water there, as well as a new pump station, which would be jointly owned. This is just a summary to provide some cost relevance to the 2 options. The reservoirs Although the reservoir to go with the joint option is more expensive at $4 million compared to the $3.5 million, the benefit that I'm seeing is that you're having two reservoirs that are built. We are only paying for our portion that we need. But in the future, for operation and maintenance, it does provide some redundancy where you can take down one reservoir and have the other in operation. Pump station-wise, there's a big savings there. Again, the 2019 would be a city-owned pump station at $1.2 million. And if we do the joint option, we're basically buying into a new pump station, but most of the capacity at 2,100 gallons per minute is something that CRW needs. So we're only paying $500,000 because that's our portion. And then for the transmission mains, on the city option would be $1.6 million, and all of that transmission main would be ours. With the joint option, we're sharing the cost with CRW, and the city's portion would be $200,000. So looking at the considerations, we talked about the consideration for water service. Water supply, again, with the city option, the 2019 CIP, all that water would be supplied by South Fork. Again, that supports our justification for water rights. With the joint option, it's unclear. You know, it's typical, and John can help me out here, but I think, you know, we need to get in discussions with CRW and talk about how we can assure that the reservoirs are filled with South Fork Water Board. I'm not even sure if that's possible or not. So for this purpose tonight, we've just flagged that, you know, right now it could be both, and we just don't know.
Okay.
The cost difference is like a and I wrote that down, 1.6 million, I think, difference. Overall, in the CIP, it's covered by systems development charges. So it's not a huge, there's like a 2% reduction. We did look at that in terms of the SDCs that would impact. But Wyatt and his team helped me look at the rate study to see what the impact would be with the rates, and it's nominal. It didn't even come through, so it's such a small amount. So from a rate standpoint, it doesn't present a huge difference. Service to our customers, anytime you control, you know, the implementation and the operations of your system, you know, I think that you can better serve your customer needs. Although CRW and the city have a great relationship, and we've had good luck so far, you know, working with all of our existing agreements. But that is a factor just to think of. For process and timing, right now we have everything in place. We can move forward tomorrow with the 2019 plan, which is to serve everybody from the city standpoint and not pursue the joint engineering solution. If we do that, we do need to get CRW's agreement. So we need to have an IGA. Both CRW and the city have master plans that show that they're independently serving the same area. So we'd have to update each other's master plans to reflect a shared approach. And of course, that would factor into the financing plan after that. One other thing I forgot to mention, and Wyatt helped with this, is there's a question, you know, something to think about is the Beaver Creek area is a huge area. It has the potential of 1,100 homes to be built in that area. And Wyatt, I know you're there. I think you ran some quick numbers, and I think he estimated the revenue would be $450,000 annual revenue. So you think about it too, your customer base is growing. So even though you have some incremental costs that we're looking at financing for these big projects initially, as the area grows, you're going to have a larger customer base to help pay down that debt or pay into the system. So that is kind of an added benefit. And what we're here tonight really is we've just laid out two options really to direct us to proceed with what we have to amend the 2012 Water Distribution Master Plan, or to direct us to pursue a joint engineering solution with CRW.
Okay. Before we move on, I want to make it clear to both Mr. Collins and Mr. Lewis and Mr. Kunkel that CRW and Sunrise have long had a desire to take over South Fork. And I want to make sure that if we're doing this joint engineering study that, or the joint engineering solution, that doesn't in any way give either Sunrise or CRW an opportunity to somehow take over South Fork.
You're talking about unintended consequences.
Yes, ma'am, I am.
Who's Sunrise?
Sunrise Water Authority is
Different.
Like
east
Happy Valley
of Happy Valley and that area out there.
another water entity.
Yes.
Well, Water Authority is different than
And it's,
than South Fork Water Board. It has a Water Authority has more power, as I understand.
Yes.
Yeah.
yes.
So, Mr. Collins, do you have anything to say about that?
I do, and I don't know if they want to take us over. What they want is our senior water rights. What they want, a third of the water providers on the Clackamas River have millions upon millions of dollars invested in infrastructure for treatment facilities that may not be able to function, while South Fork has the superior water rights and will always be able to have water. As long as there's water in the Clackamas River, we're going to be able to serve Oregon City and West Linn, and we will have the right for that water. And so what they covet is our water rights, or the potential of using some of our water rights and getting themselves in a position where they won't have stranded investment in treatment facilities that may or may not be viable.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lewis, you have anything to add to that?
No, the only thing I would say is, we never really had this issue of two suppliers on this side of the Clackamas River water until recently, and as recently as 2016, right, when the Clackamas River Water District moved forward with what they call the Backbone Project. And so, it's a new move, it's a bold move, and it complicates things on our side of the waters, or our side of the river, sorry. While we've felt like the joint engineering study was a good study and a good piece of work, they've got a great team over there at CRW. I respect the staff over there a lot. But this is not about that. This is about I believe, this decision for the $1.6 million to threaten the South Fork supply and water rights issue for that kind of money doesn't make any sense. And so we were pretty certain you landed on option one. We haven't heard that yet, but we think that's the right direction to go. We'd like to move forward with that. It is going to be an uphill battle, I think, on a lot of levels as we move forward with that capital plan. But that's one of the reasons why it was important to me that we get in front of you with this decision now, because I don't know that you were all on the city commission when we were talking through some of the past meetings that Patty mentioned. And so having you all here now, making, providing this decision that will help us, especially as we jump into land use. I don't want to do that twice. So
what is your timing?
Well, for the land use approval process, it would
for this decision? Do you need it today, next week, next month?
Well, it's a work session, so yeah, we're
you're not going to get it today.
We want to move forward. We want to move forward with the land use application.
Okay.
And so we can do that, and we'd like to have the head nod, but I don't think we need a city commission decision to do that. We can sign that application, but if it comes before you, I wouldn't want to find out that the city commission didn't like that idea.
So here's how I would recommend to proceed, and we'll have some discussion afterwards, but I'd like to talk it out tonight and then bring it forward to a regular city commission meeting for us to vote on it, so that there isn't any question about us, making a decision in a work session or anything like that.
That's fine.
I have some questions.
I'm going to let Commissioner O'Donnell go first. He had his hand up. Commissioner O'Donnell?
Well, first, before I speak, I want the public to know that 3 of our members, specifically the mayor, Commissioner Rocky Smith, and myself, sit on the South Fork Water Board, and that this decision tonight does have far-reaching implications. And specifically, and this will be a bit repetitive, but it's important to drive home this point. It's important to protect and justify. And depending on your audience, it's either protection or justification. If you're in front of a courtroom, it's justification. We need to protect these water rights for the future. And if we allow another entity, no matter who it would be, whether it be Clackamas River Water or someone else, to essentially establish a beachhead or start servicing an area that would have been serviced by our own South Fork Water, then we give them a potential legal claim to say, hey, we should get some portion of their water rights. So when you look at the thing, and the cost, the incremental cost is whatever it was, 1.6 or 1.8 million dollars for us to essentially do our own capital improvement plan as opposed to enter into a joint venture. And that gives us what we need to maintain and justify our claims. So between John Collins' worthy summation and Wyatt Parno's summation as to the financials, I've been a strong supporter of water rights and our own independence. I'm obviously going to vote but give the head nod to the capital improvement plan. Thank you.
Okay, before I go to Commissioner Smith, Mr. Parno, you have anything for us?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Holliday and City Commissioners. I appreciate that. As I'm looking for the space bar, as you've said.
Just a big long one right at the bottom of the keyboard.
Oh, there it is. So I just want to say that I appreciate the testimony that's been had so far. Thank you to Patty for an excellent presentation and for her great work over a 2-month period. She's reached out to the partners at South Fork and so forth so that we can work together to protect the city's water rights. And I appreciate your leadership, Mayor, and especially Commissioner O'Donnell and Commissioner Smith as well as the board members for South Fork Water Board on this issue. I think everything's been covered, and I know that Commissioner McGriff and Commissioner Lyle Smith are just amazing as well. So I'm excited to kind of move forward in a positive direction, and I agree with the assessments that have been made so far to protect the city's rights.
Okay, thanks, sir. Commissioner Smith?
So I agree with the comments made by Commissioner O'Donnell. I've been on the South Fork Water Board since 2008 with a small break. And so I know a lot of the history going back, and our relationship with CRW hasn't always been good. All I can think about is being in this same position years ago, talking about a joint partnership with WES and how that turned out. This is very similar. So I think that, with the comments that have been made already, we need to definitely serve our customers and protect our water rights and continue forward in that way.
Okay, thanks, sir. Commissioner Lyle Smith?
Thank you. So I have 3 questions, and part of this is still as a relatively new commissioner getting up to speed to make sure I'm covering everything. So I think you guys have answered my justification of water rights question. But I still have 3 questions. My first one is kind of confirmation. So was the joint study done in order to evaluate all alternatives and make sure that we were covering our bases? Like, why did we do the joint study?
Well, that was a result of an agreement that we made through South Fork Water Board, the City of Oregon City, CRW, and there was a larger water entity made, a CRW, Sunrise, and others, and out of that was a decision that came from an arbitrator that said we should do a joint study to figure that out, and so we did that together, and we worked through that. We had this is one pocket area. There's several other pocket areas that will show up in one of those slides where we needed to deal with, but this one was the most problematic. The other pocket areas are a little more clear-cut about what would happen and when. And if you remember, we also have a remuneration policy that we agreed to or study that we agreed to do, and we've adopted. And so there were several steps to that, and this was one of them.
And so there seems to be I feel like we have a little turf war going on, if I can put it in layman's terms. What happens if we decide we want to keep our turf? What happens with CRW? It's just up to them to deal with it? I mean, like, can we officially mark our territory? What would solidify that?
So I think the answer to that is we're in a bit of right now it's a friendly water war.
Okay.
I think it has the potential to become much more dramatic than that. And I do suspect that there may be some legal implications to that. the challenge is a timing issue in my mind, right? There's really no question whether or not the city has the right to serve that area in the future.
Right.
But we need to build the capital now to be able to do that, because as development comes on, we're not quite there. And so there is some debate about this interim period as to who could provide that water, who could collect the development fees, you know, whose customers would they be, right? We've got, there's state law about withdrawal for cities, right? We can withdraw territory. In fact, that's one of the next things Patty's going to work on is withdrawal of territory, because we've got a lot of CRW territory in our city limits that don't even get CRW water. So, you know, there's provisions there, but maybe Bill has a better.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor and Commissioner Lyle Smith. You know, I think John really hit the point of where the rubber hits the road is, you know, they're dependent on when development happens and how SDC flows. There may be an interim period where the city would have to work with CRW to get the water up there. But that is there are a variety of steps we can take now, and this is part of it, to ensure that our ultimate goal is the one that gets there. I mean, is where we end up. And we can do that. As John said, we have the ability to withdraw property. We, as a city, review all land use planning, and that part of that is infrastructure. And so, you know, the variety of controls that we have. CRW certainly has their interest in making sure that that it comes out in the best interest for them. But we're probably in the better position at the moment. And how it's going to play out, you know, we can make some guesses, but a lot's going to depend on things that are outside of our control. And what we do is prepare best to handle those.
Okay, thank you. And sorry, that was just question one, which flowed into like three, but that was really one. Hopefully the second one will be faster. So your slide showed two different capacities. Like our solution was producing 500 gallons or whatever, and then the joint solution was like 2,100. That's a pretty significant difference in capacity. Are we concerned at all about that difference? Do we need that higher capacity?
I'm going to just say not at all. The reason it was the 2,100, that was for the pump station, is it's for CRW's purposes. We only need the smaller amount. That's why we were only contributing the $500,000. So basically, you're looking at buying into a much bigger, complex pump station to join with CRW versus having a smaller pump station that we would own and operate.
Okay. Much shorter. My third question is, does West Linn, as a partner with South Fork, do they have a voice in any of this conversation? Have they expressed any comments, or is it they really doesn't matter, it's just Oregon City? And I'm just curious, because I don't know.
For this, I think it's mostly Oregon City. We certainly had discussions about the, you know, at South Fork about CRW coming across the river and doing this expansion kind of around our backside. John, what do you think? Do we need to have a joint discussion with West Linn on this or not?
Well, I think we've had this discussion several times by virtue of conversations and board meetings. I can tell you that I had a good conversation with Mayor Axelrod today, and he supports preserving South Fork's water rights and the ability to serve South Fork water to Oregon City and West Linn residents. And likewise with South Fork Water Board West Linn member Sacklick is also supportive of it.
All right.
That's it.
That's your questions?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so I have just one more before I get to Commissioner McGriff, and that is that we have to also think 30 and 40 and 50 years down the road. And so as, you know, CRW kind of wends its way into our backyard, we have to realize that while we don't need a UGB expansion now, certainly in 15 or 20 years we might.
Right.
So we want to keep as much of that service under our control as we can as we, you know, plan to at some point, because south and east are the only two directions we can go at this point. So we need to be thinking about the UGB expansion, you know, in 20 or 30 years, and how this decision that we're making affects those decisions later on. Commissioner McGriff, you got anything for us?
Yes, yeah, I have worked with South Fork Water Board in my past life. I guess part of what my my one question is, and then I have a comment, is that I'm hoping that and I'm assuming we are working with potential development entities to help them understand that what our timing is. And I hope that we are expressing our interest to them to let them know that it's, they probably have the right, but it's probably not appropriate at this time to be working with another water entity. And so I feel that if we have to go a little bit slower in terms of the development for the Trimble Creek area, then that's okay, because we need to make sure that we protect our water rights first in the interest of our broader community. So it is about development, but it's also about the broader community that we have here in Oregon City and our partners in West Linn that we need to think about first. So
Was there a question there?
Yes, I already asked the question, but I want to say, based on that, I would say, option one is really where we need to go.
Okay, so, Mr. Conkle, I want you to just put this for a quick discussion item on the next available agenda, and we'll have a motion and vote on it at that point.
So my question to John was about working with people who have already expressed interest, saying, I want to develop in Oregon City, knowing that.
Oh, I didn't hear the question mark after that.
That was the question.
I didn't either, but.
I said, how are we working with potential development entities to help them understand what our position is, and that, it may or may not be quite kosher to be working with another water entity.
Right, well, we're trying to balance a lot of things,
Sure.
right? There's a lot of desire for success in the Beaver Creek concept area, and there's desire for us to serve that area with water. So there's, I would say competing interests, but the idea of reaching out to them, we've been talking about really this shared interim solution with CRW at the present time. And as we're getting clearer and clearer on that with the CRW staff, we're also hearing more and more concerns from them about how we would do that. And for us, it's not only serving water, it's making sure we're collecting the development charges such that we can pay for or repay for that development. So the development community changes like wildfire out there. We're not really always sure who we're talking to when it comes to the development community, but the golf course has had a pre-app meeting. We did talk to them about the fact that on the, depending on their timeline in the interim, we may need to rely on CRW. And if that's the case, then, how do we do that in a way that preserves our long-term right to move in there?
That would be my concern when I was mentioning to Mayor Holliday that this is fraught with unintended consequences that I think we don't want to go there with. So that's my biggest concern.
All right. Thank you, folks, for your presentation. Appreciate it. And we're going to move on to Communications Strategic Plan. Mr. Kunkel.
Thank you, Mayor,
Thank you,
evening
Patty.
commissioners. I'm going to invite Kristen Brown up as well. So the Communication Strategic Plan outlines the ways in which Oregon City leverages the opportunities that new technology offers to communicate and disseminate information. The plan identifies guiding values, key objectives, target audiences, communication resources, and a brand guide. And this is Commission Goal number 4, pursue opportunities to increase transparency and encourage citizen participation, and it includes create and implement a citywide communication plan. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Kristen.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. It's an honor tonight to share with you our communication strategic plan. So a little bit of background, increasing communications and engagement with our citizens has been a goal of commissioners for more than a dozen years. And as a city, we have been communicating. In the past, it's been in a decentralized way, meaning that each department is responsible for their communications, which isn't super equitable because some departments had channels, other departments didn't. And in 2018, the city hired a communications coordinator. In 2018, we also did our first community satisfaction survey, which was a statistically valid survey sent out to many community members to provide us a baseline of where people's sentiment was with the services that we provide. And really, that information helped us create the strategic plan so that way we're not grasping at straws. We've got statistically valid information to draw from. So in 2019, I, with a team of one representative from each department, sat down and we really fleshed out this strategic plan. I also chatted with some of our partner organizations, such as Clackamas County and Metro, to review their strategic plan and just kind of to make sure that we were on the same page and we had similar values and objectives, so that way we're not talking out of turn, if you will. So in 2020, the idea was that we would implement this plan and we would use this year to review it, to refine it. Since the city has never had a strategic plan before, we really wanted to get the basics of what we were doing in this year, what we look forward to doing, and I look at this document as a guiding document, really. So if I'm to fall off the face of the earth and someone's to come in and they want to know, what are we doing, how are we communicating, they can pick up this plan and they can understand it. There's a piece at the end that we were really missing, and it was a logo policy and a branding guideline. We hadn't had that in the past, so I was really excited to get that up and running and share with our departments. So our team decided that we had 5 core values. 1, that communication be interactive, meaning two-way. 2, proactive, meaning that we are sharing information, obviously, before anything comes to a head, or we're sharing information out more effectively before it comes before you guys and the commission. 3, that we're decentralized and centralized. So we didn't want to dismantle the communication channels that were already built. There were already followers there, but we wanted a centralized communication channel, which there hasn't been in the past. There hasn't been a single person that's really been working with every single department to gather all the information about the programs and the events and getting them concise and consolidated. Number 4 is themed and branded. We want our citizens to be able to pick up a document or an item that's created by the city, and we want them to be able to recognize, oh, this is from the city of Oregon City. And number 5 is innovative. We want to meet people where they're at, and if that means we have to open a TikTok account and do some funky dancing, then maybe that's what we need to do. So in the strategic plan, you'll see there's a review of all of our audiences, and we divided them into external audiences and internal audiences. External, obviously, are the citizens of Oregon City, but they also include businesses, news media, other governments, organizations, which is nonprofits, and our visitors. Internal communication includes employees, boards, commissions, committees, and contractors and consultants, as sometimes contractors and consultants go out on the behalf of the city. And then we get into a tool analysis, which is kind of geeky, but there's strengths and weaknesses listed for every tool that we have available to communicate with our residents. And really for this presentation, I'm just going to focus on the top 2, which is trail news and social media, which were the top 2 methods of information, or the top 2 sources of information that our citizens said that they receive information about the city. So a quick overview of social media's strengths. It is quick. There is a broad reach. You can have that two-way communication. We're able to show metrics for every post. It provides an archive of communications, which is great when we have open records requests. It's fairly low cost to enter into, and it can be informal and personal. The weaknesses of social media is not every channel can host the same information, meaning we can't use the same image and the same description on Twitter as we can on Instagram. So it takes time. Just saying, hey, put this on social media, that takes work. You have to craft an image, you have to craft the message, and it has to change depending on which channel you're putting it on. Some channels support some information better than others. Complicated projects, poor John, are really hard to get out on social media because there's a lot of meat to our projects. So oftentimes you'll see that there's 3 or 4 sentences about a project, and then we direct people to our website. And not all information that we post are seen by our followers. That's due to an algorithm on all social media platforms. The great news is, as of January 2020, we had over 50,000 followers on all of our channels. And obviously that number is higher now. And in the last month, we have increased 10% in our Twitter followers and 5% in our Facebook followers on the City Hall page. So the ability to get important information out to a broad audience, we got that, which is amazing. I'm gonna pop into Trail News now. So it has high recognition. Trail News has been in publication for more than 15 years. Longer articles can be written, and it has high readership. When there's a spelling error, I get a call from a former Oregon City English department teacher, and she points it out to me. So
I wonder who that might be.
Who knows?
I had to write staff reports for her too.
The weakness is it is not timely. It is a quarterly publication, so we work about 4 months out in order to get that content produced, for it to be printed, get to the post office, and it to be mailed postal patron. I will back up, though, a positive of Trail News is it is mailed postal patron, so if you have an Oregon City address, you are getting a Trail News. But back to the weaknesses, I have had people call me and say, oh gosh, I didn't get it in the mail. I described what the cover looks like. Oh man, I think my husband threw that one away. So it can get confused, and there is a cost to produce it. This is a list of all of our other external tools, and in the plan you'll see the strengths, the weaknesses, and the audiences. I did want to pause on the e-newsletter because this is a tool that was born from our Citizen Involvement Committee back in 2017 when they started creating their engagement outreach plan. There was a conversation, and I worked very closely with our staff liaison about how to collect all of the information about everything that's happening in the city, so that way these CIC members can share it equitably. So we came up with the idea of the monthly e-newsletter. It's quick, it's timely, it's inexpensive, and we have the ability to share that on our website, on Facebook, on Nextdoor, on Twitter, on Instagram, at least with a link. You could go to a neighborhood association meeting and you could read the articles out loud if you wanted to. So there is equity there. And I will say, as of last month, we again have increased our subscribership to that monthly e-newsletter. It took a while to tweak. We were using our native platform on our website, but that wasn't graphically interesting, so we did have to transition to MailChimp in order to produce it. Internal tools, these are exactly what you think we would use to communicate internally, but I did want to pause and just bring up presentations because maybe you guys have noticed in 2020 all of the department heads are using the same template for presentations, and that was born out of the strategic plan in order for us to maintain our theme and our branding. When people are watching at home, a consistent template helps for readership and viewership.
Actually, I hadn't noticed, but thank you.
What?
I noticed.
And now on to the objectives. This is really the meat of this plan, and this is giving us some kind of guidelines as to how to move forward and what we want to do in the future, as well as what we're doing currently. So increasing awareness, that is content, right? How can you be aware of something if you don't know about it? Increasing engagement. We want to provide access. We want to enhance our transparency, and our last objective is to reinforce credibility. And all of that is great sound bites, but it doesn't mean anything if I can't show you some deliverables. So increasing awareness, one of the things that we did this year was we created a year in review brochure, which you guys saw at the Mayor's State of the City address on the table. It's also online. It was also shared on our social media channels, and that's a 12-page document that really highlights each of our departments and their big accomplishments that year. You'll see in the middle image, we've done a lot of utility bill inserts, more last year than we have this year, surrounding the 175th anniversary. And then that weird screen that has all those pictures is a dashboard screenshot of something that I use called Hootsuite, and it's a social media monitoring platform. And it's really a way for me to view all of our channels and share information more easily, and also to kind of monitor comments, send some comments off to staff if they haven't responded. I'll send it off to them and say, hey, check this out, or maybe I don't know the answer to this, can you help me respond to this person? The increasing awareness is also in the method of having a message and disseminating it amongst all of our channels. So that's the weird spider-looking image up there in the corner. Increasing engagement. Now, this is done through various departments. One of the things we talked about is, gosh, we have a great summer concert series. Why don't we meet the people there where they're at and share information about our programs and our events? And so one of the things we did last year was we did giveaways, encouraging people to attend our August 24th, 175th year commemoration. The middle image is our Public Works Department at a high school event, sharing information about, what else? Water. And then our library provides these surveys called program feedback. We want to find out where our attendees are finding information about the programs. And the last image I wanted to share with you guys, we do promoted posts occasionally, and we did one with our debt relief grant. And you'll notice in the fine print, we reached over 5,000 people, but half of those were only reached through us paying and boosting that post. So
Yeah.
that is another way to.
What did that cost though? Like $10?
No, that was 200.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So providing access, we've got Wi-Fi available in our public facilities. We're providing classes and lessons for those who need more information on how to access the internet, how to access more information. And then the library received a grant in 2019 for an ADA accessible desk. And then I have to give you guys a plug because on the Enhancing Transparency, anytime I post pictures of you guys in the field doing what you do best, which is interacting with our residents, the engagement just skyrockets. So thank you for being my models and allowing me to share pictures of you guys, because people connect with people. And so having a government post information about a project is great, but anytime we can share pictures of you guys doing the great work that you do, it just speaks volumes. And I can say it also speaks volumes when we share images of our employees and share what they're doing and how they're really helping our processes and making engaging with the city easier. Consistency is also huge for enhancing transparency. We put out flash alerts regularly to local media, so that way they can carry stories for us. And we also post city commission agendas and work session agendas. Reinforcing credibility is also in working with our partners. So one of the images you'll see is the Clackamas County quarterly publication. They shared information about our August 24th event. The middle image is a screenshot from our newsletter where we share information about our regional partners. And then that last image is a screenshot of us providing space in Trail News for the farmers market and then sharing their information on social media as well. Timeliness also enforces credibility. This is a screenshot on Nextdoor of our monthly e-newsletter post. It comes out the first of the month or the day before the first, depending on where it follows, so people know to come and expect that information. So what's the future for communications? Well, you guys will see some video PSAs rolled out from our Public Works Department on some really exciting topics like street maintenance and winter weather responses and where your water comes from.
What about don't flush your wipes down the toilet?
Oh, please don't flush your wipes down the toilet. We're the very first virtual open house we'll host is for the Malala Streetscape Avenue project, and I see those becoming obviously more important now in this period of time, but in the future as well. You'll be seeing more Facebook Lives, Instagram Stories, more branded material. We're looking at other platforms that help increase engagement, like bangthetable.com and MyAnswer, and there are other platforms that are out that allow people to opt in for receiving text about general information. You can already do that through the public alert system that the county provides, and I encourage everybody to sign up for public alerts. But there are other mediums that we can use to provide more low-level information. People could opt in for a reminder about council agendas or commission meetings. So it's something we're looking at, always on the horizon. And with that, I'll take any questions you have about the strategic plan.
Commissioner Lyle-Smith?
Thank you, Mayor. I have a couple of questions. How much do you follow comments and conversations on social media? Kind of what's your gauge? How are you doing that?
Sure. It's hard because there's a lot of conversations happening, and it's really weird because our information, as soon as I put it out, some people don't get it until 3 or 4 days later. So if it's the day of even, I would say 48 hours, I can see what's going on and pretty much try to respond as quickly as possible. If someone's sharing their opinion, that's not something I'm going to comment on. Everybody has the right to share their opinion. But if there's a specific question that I can answer, I typically follow up with an employee just to make sure the information's correct, because I'm no engineer. I don't really know what's going on. I'm not the boots on the ground in the park, so I really want to make sure I'm getting quality information versus, something quickly I could say.
Do you share comments that you receive about a particular project or whatever the post is with staff so that they're aware of maybe what some of the feedback you're receiving?
Sure, the sentiment definitely. When I'm reaching out to get an answer about something, I'll share the post and I'll share the question with an engineer for a specific project. And then in our department head meetings, if something has come up, then I'll share it with our department heads.
And then, are you looking at the website analytics as far as seeing just the use and for particular items and maybe rejiggering kind of the placement of things based on analytics? Is that driving your website design?
Website design, we're looking at the latest web design was produced in 2017, is that correct? Kind of did an overhaul.
That's earliest, it might have been earlier than that.
My biggest focus is what does it look like on a mobile device, because that's where 70% of our viewership is. So my focus is really, is the information someone's looking for the very first maybe 1 or 2 scrolls that they would have?
Sure, I would agree with that, but maybe yearly an analytics look of what are the top things that people are, what your click rates, what are people looking at, so that we can make sure that if it's buried and people are having to hunt for it, that if it's your top 10 items, we need to make sure that people can find those things. Right. I don't know what those analytics are, but I'm just hoping that somebody is looking at them. Yeah. And then my last question is, in general, you mentioned the flash alerts. How would you describe the pickup rate of local media for your flash alerts? Is it successful? Is it
It's pretty low. Depends on what it is, if it's timely and seasonally appropriate. I would say 30% probably pick them up.
Okay.
Depending on what's happening nationally.
It's a
too.
contentious issue, probably gets picked up,
Yes,
but,
very
okay.
much so.
It was just a general, I was just wondering, since you
Yeah,
mentioned it.
I would say 30% because we're putting, 12 to 15 out a month.
Yeah, I guess in general, those were my questions, but, good job on the communications, plan and, the style guide and all of that. I was a project manager for my day job for the Department of Land Conservation and Development. We redid our entire website. We did style guide, we did branding, we paid a consultant to help. So I'm familiar with the work. I know it's a lot of work, and it's hard to change an organization and to get the big amoeba to use logos correctly and do branding and all, but it does make a difference in your messaging, and so I think you have a lot of great material here. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Well, as everyone knows, I've expressed concerns about the effectiveness of the communications coordinator position since the beginning. So I found myself delving into the PowerPoint and memo pretty deeply. In fact, probably at the conclusion, I'll submit a written memo to Tony and to the communications coordinator. You know, I appreciate the fact that we're trying to increase our communications, or we're trying to improve our systems, that continuous improvement is our goal. My focus is primarily on external communications. As our coordinator said, you know, the Oregon City Facebook followers are less than 3,000, Chit Chat 28,000. I've kind of monitored it for a few days, and there's seldom are comments left by readers on our Facebook. And I don't know if that's because of the small audience or lacks relevance to the reader. The page does offer the ability to share, and that's something we need to optimize. Nextdoor, under another consideration, claims about 8,300 members, and the city is able to engage with citizens in posts, but only in those posts shared by the city. And I did notice that in those cases, responses from the city were not always made and sometimes not timely. And it has its own shortcomings, as our coordinator would say, that the city cannot see posts made by citizens. It is interesting that 71% of our survey indicate the information from the Trail News is our main focus, and it has its shortcomings, as the coordinator pointed out. Can't address things in a timely manner and can't address specific issues. So, you know, I had hoped, I remember the first time we had the coordinator come before us and say, what could you do and not do? I was pretty disappointed. I actually thought about, why do we have the position given the limitations? But I see improvements being made, and that's heartening. I'd like to see continuing the performance increase. And if we can have a larger presence in social media through posting and monitoring, and I'm not sure how much monitoring goes on. I know that I've seen the mayor get on occasion, and myself, and we've done that mainly to put out fires or the beginnings of an unfounded rumor that needed to be put to a stop. So, you know, we wanted an interactive mode. You know, the number of followers, the ability, and I just continue to monitor. It seems to me that Nextdoor seems to work better than Facebook, as the city appears to be more interactive, and the city is able to engage in citizens, but once again, in posts shared by the city only. So I guess in summation, I had hoped that we could monitor social media and report back to the commission topics and concerns of the citizens. So all in all, you know, I think I'm pleased that we're improving performance, continue to improve it. Take a look at this. I'll submit this to the city manager, and feel free to respond, and maybe we can take additional measures because it's all about external contact. I'm really not as concerned about our internal contacts, but the ability to communicate with this city. And believe me, I know the difficulties because, you know, I've occasionally commented, as has the mayor, and sometimes you get sniped right away. But to get a valid comment out there from an official or an official source means a lot. And I'll conclude what I have to say with that statement. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, sir. Commissioner McGriff?
Yes, I do want to say that I read everything as well. And like Commissioner Lyle Smith, I've also been through several organizations doing complete redos, including the City of Oregon City. And I will say that may she rest in peace, the late Commissioner Elaine Woolsey is the one that came up with the logo that I will say on record that I always hated because it was too busy. But it got pushed through at a time when they wanted something new, and I said to myself, that won't last.
May she rest in peace.
Yes, that's why I said, may she rest in peace. She was a very dear friend and served on the city commission for many years and had her rotation as mayor. Well, so with that said, Elaine, thank you. I do think that what you have put together is very well done. I was very pleased. I read through it twice, as I said. The thing that I also noted is that I think that you did emphasize, which I will disagree with my esteemed colleague, Mr. Frank O'Donnell, Commissioner Frank O'Donnell. I think internal contacts are important as well as the external, because if we don't have our act together internally, what we say then gets reflected back externally, and it needs to be a balance. So I appreciate the fact that that was focused on, and I know you and I've had a conversation about some photographs and things that we're going to try to do a little more, broaden our scope about who we're taking pictures of or getting pictures of. So that, I'm not going to go into that. But I think I also concurred with your statements regarding, I know people do read trail news, and I always tell somebody, if you didn't get it, just run to the post office. If you happen to be there, there's always some at the post office, so you can get it there. But is there maybe a way to, with the flash information that you're putting out, to maybe brand it as, maybe, depending on what you're putting out, like a Trail News Extra, like, this is like a flash thing that might be in Trail News, but it's something that's more timely?
Yeah.
And maybe, because maybe people recognize that, maybe they recognize that particular emphasis of it. I know that mine right now, the one we have, is sitting right on my coffee table. So when somebody comes into my house, they can, there it is, right there.
Right. Well, to your point, the e-newsletter, when I was talking about kind of the evolving nature of that, we did brand it this year as e-Trail News.
Oh, perfect.
So
Perfect.
that
Yeah,
way
I thought you had.
people understand
Dan.
that, they get it, and again, it's that recognition that it's from the city.
Yeah, it's that over and over again. This is us. This is us. This is us.
Because
So
you got to hit them 7 times before they
I know, definitely.
connect.
Okay.
So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Commissioner Smith, you have anything extra for us?
I'll just echo the same comments. I always think there's room for improvement, but this is a great plan. There's a lot of work put into it. I definitely think that we are doing a better job as a city, and clearly this plan points out in how to brand the city. I am one that hates rebranding after rebranding after rebranding, which we tend to do a lot in Oregon City. So once we have something that's visually pleasing and consistent, the goal is to stick with it. I would love to be able to see this be a consistent vision and image for the city. I think it's effective, and seeing it through commission presentations and through Trail News and through all the logo uses and signage throughout the city. I think the more we do that, the better. And continue to be consistent in all those ways. I think that helps a lot. So, thank you.
Okay. And I echo all the comments. I think you've done a great job in one of the things that, I was asking for when we brought this position on was that we were having more, different channels in social media to be able to do that. And as much as I am active on Facebook, a little less so on Nextdoor, I don't do all those other things because it eats up enough time during my day just the way it is.
Kidding.
But I would encourage my fellow commissioners that if you're on Facebook or one of the other platforms and Kristen puts an update out, if you would share it to your personal things, however that works in those other platforms. I always try to share it to my own followers or groups or whatever they call them. And I also try to share them out to there's a couple, 3 Oregon City groups on Facebook. Some, are pretty sticky about whether it's political or not. And, I've had a few refuse, which is okay. But generally speaking, as long as it's informational stuff from the city, it's able to get out. So as we share those things on those channels, then that just redoubles the amount of eyes that get on it. And I have to admit, I'm a super user according to the Oregon City Facebook page.
Super fan. Super fan.
Super fan.
Super fan.
So there's a goal for you guys to strive for, to be super fans of the Oregon City Facebook page. All right. That's it for me. You have anything for communication, sir?
I just want to give one update. So I appreciate the work that went into the discussion about the mobile shower unit at Father's Heart that we're going to try for 2 weeks. We'll set a date here in the next week or so for that special meeting. Since we're coming together, we might put 1 or 2 other things on there as well to just kind of move some things along.
Sure.
But I did want to point out, there was a discussion about the location of the trailer on the property, and it was proposed originally on the backside by Barclay Park. In looking at the site a little bit more where the utilities are, they're proposing to put it on the front side in the smaller parking lot right along Washington.
Perfect.
Just to see how that works. I just wanted to let you know that after we had the meeting on Wednesday night, the operations at EOC had discussions with Father's Heart, and they've proposed to move that to the forward. So that's the only communication that I have for tonight.
I have a question for you about that, if I may.
Go ahead.
Mayor Holiday. So one of the questions I got after that meeting was, are we going to use any metrics or any what evaluation criteria are we wanting to look at to evaluate whether this is going to stay, go, or modify or whatever? But if we don't have any, I would appreciate it if you would think about that to make sure that we are being fair in our assessment.
Understood.
Commissioner Lessman?
Thank you. Really quick on that. I mean, I think our intention is for it to be temporary as a response to COVID.
Yes.
So I don't think there is a discussion about this as a permanent option, but we can circle back to that. That wasn't my intent.
Yeah, that was one of the questions I got, and I said that was not our intent.
Well, I think more importantly, as phase 1 opens, that opens up to 25 people, and at 25 people, they can start using the showers inside again.
Right.
So that shouldn't be an issue.
So my question, do you have an update, even a small one, on this grant, the small business grant program?
relief.
I saw Mr. Graham walk out, unfortunately, leave us. But I just didn't know if you had a quick update
I
that you
do.
could give.
Let me just give me 1 second, make sure I get it accurate. So approximately, opened up the grant process, went through that, and as you recall, we will write the checks to the business that's owed the money rather than to the business owner themselves. So approximately $132,000 in checks will be sent out tomorrow. So those have been processed and ready to be mailed. That is approximately 60 checks. We'll be sending emails to the awardees this week to let them know. Another batch of checks, totally approximately $30,000 will be cut and mailed out this Friday. So
the timing is the check goes out and then the email? Is that what I heard you say?
as we're getting the check ready to the debtor, to the debting company to make sure that we've got everything lined up. Yep, and then we'll send out notice that it's been sent.
So it seems like there's still room for accepting more applications?
We're currently still accepting. So going through the process, it was interesting with the two biggest things that we saw that weren't met as part of the criteria were profit and loss statements done correctly or even being provided, and then lease agreements. Lease agreements that were out of date, lease agreements that weren't signed. So because the number of applications that we received did not exceed the amount of money that was available, staff reached out to the ones that had incomplete information and tried to explain what was wrong and give them the opportunity to resubmit. And so we are still seeing some come in, new applications, but pretty limited. So there was still capacity then for those ones that had some errors in the application to resubmit as well. So it would have been different if we would have had $350,000 worth of applications and it all went. So that wasn't the situation we were in. I believe off the top of my head, I think we had about $260,000 of requested funds.
Unplugged. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, there's nothing there.
Okay.
Oh, wait, there it is. Let me close it.
Does anybody else have anything? I've lost my screen,
I
so.
just have two things to report on my
question for
committee
Mr.
assignments.
One second, Frank. Go ahead, Commissioner McGriff.
Thank you, Mayor Holliday. So under Commission Committee Reports on item F, I wanted to report that the Downtown Oregon City Association is continuing to meet. They have been a really great partner in the debt relief program, getting the word out to their members. They've collaborated a lot with the chamber in getting the information out. And I'm pleased to report that, I'm sure Mr. Lewis can also report this, but that the system that we're using at the elevator is working quite well. I've been using it on a fairly regular basis just to cruise through downtown and see what's going on. So, and I've talked to the staff and they seem fairly comfortable. So I'm really happy that we're continuing to able to provide that as access. That last time I used it was yesterday, and there were, I got out because there were a couple people who were in wheelchairs that needed to get in, so I didn't get in with them anyway, because that was like 2 people. So I got myself out of there till they came in. And then the Willamette Falls and Landings Heritage Area, we are not meeting even by Zoom, because some of you may realize or not realize that is like a 20-member committee, and I don't think I want to have a 20-member meeting on Zoom. But we are being kept up to date on what's going on with our executive team, and they are working very hard with the city of West Lynn on their potential office building, which is really great. And also from the executive director was thank you. I was CC'd on it from Mr. Conkle and Mr. Parno for getting the check issued. As we know, we're all having a little cash flow issues here, and so our contribution to that group has been very much appreciated.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner O'Donnell, you had something?
Just a question for Mr. Conkle. I'm sure we have our viewers that are applications for the downtown or the assistance program, the economic assistance. For those people who did not supply a correctly filled out application, have they been given notice as to what needed to be done to correct that application and make them candidates? And secondly, if an application was incomplete, is it then treated as a new application as opposed to holding their original place in line?
So my understanding is that a majority of those that had missing information have been notified by staff. I think that some of them may have been examples of a home occupation that could have never met the criteria versus your profit and loss statement was inaccurate or didn't cover the right amount of time, right? One's kind of a technical missing information versus you just don't qualify. I would need to check with James and I can follow up to see exactly where they're at in the notification process. They've been focused on trying to get the checks cut and out the door up to this point. So your second question about where do they fall, because we were able to go through and identify everybody who met the criteria and cut that check and still had headroom, we're not at a point where there's more applications than money available. So we give it back. If someone is missing information, we've let them know, they resubmit it and we just process it. So it's not like we're 40 applications deep and they go in at 41. I think we're pretty caught up to where we're at. And so they resubmit and we process it. If they meet it, we cut the check at that point.
All right.
Mayor Holliday, I do want to say that I was approached by a concerned citizen who admonished me as to why we were making it a requirement that they have a city business license for this program. And I gave him the reason why we required that and strongly suggested, they said it was unfair. And I said, well, it is unfair that you've been operating a business within the city limits and are not registered with the city. So that was my, I said, please get a business license.
Okay. Commissioner O'Donnell, that answer your question?
Yeah, I think given the current circumstances, there's no need to restructure the queue. If we were to lose with applications, then I think we'd have to reconsider that position.
Okay. Commissioner Smith, you have anything?
No.
Okay, so I did get an email from Representative Drazan, the House Minority Leader, and it was a kind of a strange 3-page document about something about the state for cities that had provided relief money, they were going to provide some kind of matching money. But it was like really convoluted and I couldn't figure out exactly what it said. So
My understanding is that there was, I think it's Business Oregon has put together a grant program for local jurisdictions, which we're applying for.
okay,
as well.
I just wanted to make sure you were aware of it because I didn't forward it on to you. I got buried in 3 more Zoom conferences. So with that, we're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, a while back.